I was 3 hours past the end of my shift at Halden Reach Station when the burst came through, and I want to be clear about that from the start, because it matters later. Nobody ordered me to be listening. My relief had signed in. I had my jacket on. I was standing at the door of the comms deck with a mug of cold coffee in one hand, and I stopped because of a shape in the noise floor, not because of a duty roster. Halden Reach sits on the outer edge of a sector nobody important cares about, a listening post built to watch shipping lanes and log the occasional smuggler. It is 6 people, 2 skiffs, and a dish array old enough that half the manuals are printed on paper, because the digital archive was lost in a server fire before I was posted here. Most of what we catch is static. Weather, the dull hum of a quiet border. Nights are long. Men fill long nights with whatever keeps them from staring at the wall, and what I chose, years ago, was a private study nobody assigned me, and nobody ever asked about. I had spent 11 years teaching myself the cadence of Dominion intelligence traffic as a hobby, the way another man might learn to read cloud formations. It started as boredom and became something closer to devotion. I built my own decryption routines on a station terminal in my off hours, tested them against archived intercepts nobody higher up thought were worth keeping, and told no one, because there was no operational reason for a border comms tech to know any of it. I was not trained for this. I was simply a man who had run out of other things to learn. The Ophiran Dominion doesn't broadcast on open bands. Their operational channels are narrow, brief, folded into burst transmissions 1/10 of a second long, gone before a normal receiver even registers the spike. I recognized the shape of one anyway, ghosting across a frequency we weren't supposed to be able to hear at all, riding an atmospheric skip so rare my equipment had a name for it in the manual. A once-a-decade ducting event, when a cold layer over the ice shelf bent signal paths that should never touch. It wasn't addressed to us. It wasn't addressed to anyone who could hear it. That was the whole point of the channel. A covert cutter's distress key, meant for one receiving station on the far side of Dominion space, meant to die in the dark if that station didn't answer in time. I sat back down at the console instead of walking out the door. The burst repeated 9 times over 40 minutes, each one weaker, each one carrying the same compressed telemetry, once I stripped the encryption layers I'd taught myself to peel back over those 11 years. More out of curiosity than any operational need. A vessel, unnamed in the clear, describing itself only by a hull designation, the Hollow Wick, adrift after a collision with debris in a field it should never have been charting in the first place. Hull breach, contained, drive fouled. A slow tumble into the debris belt's densest layer, with an estimated 14 hours before impact damage became terminal. I understood immediately why no one was coming. The Hollow Wick was a covert intelligence cutter. It had no business in that sector under any treaty either side had signed. If its own directorate scrambled a rescue, they'd be admitting, on the record, that they'd been running reconnaissance past a line they'd sworn they respected. Easier, from where they sat, to let the tumble finish. Ships like that are built to disappear quietly when they fail. I am not an intelligence officer. I am not a diplomat. I am a comms tech who was 3 hours off shift with a cold coffee, and I made a decision that night that no one at Halden Reach had trained me to make. I didn't call anyone. I opened the return channel myself. Low power, tight beam, keyed to the same folded protocol I'd spent a decade learning, for no reason I could ever explain to my supervisors. I didn't send a rescue request up my own chain, because there was no fleet coming from us either. Nothing at Halden Reach but 2 patrol skiffs and a station crew of 6, and any request I filed would take longer to clear review than the Hollow Wick had left. What I sent instead was smaller, and, I think now, more useful. A navigational correction. I had the debris field's density map from 3 years of border surveys nobody at command had ever bothered to read. I found them a drift line 11 degrees off their current heading, a corridor through the belt's thinnest shell that would buy them time instead of ending it, and I sent it once, flat, without preamble, without a signature. My hands were not quite steady as I keyed the transmission, not fear, but the strange weight of acting with no authority behind me at all, no station chief's approval, no fleet command relay, nothing in any manual that covered what I was doing. Then I sat there and waited to see if anyone was even listening on their end anymore. The station around me was quiet. My relief asleep 2 decks up, the dish array turning through its slow automated sweep, as if nothing unusual were happening, which, as far as the rest of Halden Reach was concerned, it wasn't. The reply came 40 minutes later, and it was not what I expected. Not gratitude, not confusion. A single line, translated by my own software into something closer to disbelief than relief. This channel does not reach Earth. Confirm origin. I confirmed it. I told them exactly what I was. A night shift comms tech, off duty, alone, no fleet behind me, no order above me, just a man who happened to still be listening to a frequency his own government had stopped monitoring years ago. There was a long silence after that. I assumed the channel had failed, or that whoever was reading my words on the other end had decided the whole exchange was some kind of trap and gone dark rather than risk it. I was already reaching to shut the console down when the second reply came through, shorter than the first. I am Intelligence Officer Sael Mordrani. We did not send this to you. I know, I sent back. You didn't aim it at anyone who could answer. I just happened to still be listening. I have imagined her face more times than I should admit in the years since. Some Dominion officer standing over a cracked console on a ship she wasn't supposed to be flying through a sector she wasn't supposed to be in, reading a correction from a species with no fleet in range, no treaty obligation, no reason at all to have caught the signal, let alone answered it. I don't know what expression a Dominion officer wears when that happens. I only know what she sent next, which was not thanks exactly. It read more like a woman closing a ledger she hadn't expected to need. Corridor confirmed. Adjusting heading. This exchange did not occur. I told her I understood. And I did. If her directorate learned that Earth, of all the species in that stretch of dark, the one with the least stake in her mission, and the least reason to care whether she lived, had quietly kept her out of a debris field her own people were prepared to let finish her, it would cost her more than the collision itself. So I logged the encounter under my own name only, off the official record, filed as a personal maintenance note about calibrating an old receiver during a rare ducting event. Nothing about a ship, nothing about a name. I didn't tell my station chief. I never reported it up the chain that existed specifically to catch things like this. The hollow wick cleared the debris belt 9 hours later, according to a single passive track I kept running out of my own curiosity, off the clock, on my own time again. I watched the faint return until it dropped below my equipment's threshold, somewhere past the belt's outer shell, still tumbling slightly, but no longer heading anywhere fatal. I never confirmed whether she made her rendezvous point, whether her directorate ever learned how close they had come to losing a ship and a name they would have preferred simply to forget. After that, nothing. No further transmission. No acknowledgement. That is, I've come to understand exactly how it was supposed to end. I filed my maintenance note the next morning, 3 sentences about receiver calibration during an unusual ducting event, and my station chief signed off on it without reading past the header, the way he signed off on everything from Halden Reach that didn't involve an actual incident report. Nobody asked me why I'd stayed 3 hours past shift change. Nobody asked because nobody there had any reason to think there was a question worth asking. I am not telling this story because it changed anything between the Dominion and Earth. It didn't. There was no treaty signed, no alliance formed, no fleet dispatched, no headline anywhere. 2 governments who will likely never speak of it went on exactly as they had before, and I went back to my regular shifts at Halden Reach the following week, as though nothing at all had happened on a frequency I wasn't supposed to be monitoring, answering a signal that was never meant to reach anyone who could hear it. I still keep the old receiver tuned to that band, off duty, most nights, out of habit more than expectation. I don't think I'll ever hear it again. I don't think it needs to happen again for it to have mattered once.